Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Thursday, July 26, 2018, in the Atlantic Basin over the next 48 and 120 hours. No development is anticipated. In the Eastern Pacific, we do have a few areas to watch, trying to develop out this way. If we mouse over them, let's do that. Well, here we go. The Western system, 70% chance. The Middle system, 80%, and now newly added over the next few days, maybe something trying to develop a little bit farther to the east. So it has about a 20% chance of development, but that's down the road a piece. And so, busy out that way, but nothing certainly threatening to land, as you can clearly see. So you folks here along, Cabo San Lucas and down the mainland parts of Mexico into Central America, nothing to worry about from the tropics, so that's great news. Looking at the Atlantic Basin wide shot this afternoon from the Tropical Tidbits site, very stable air mass in place still over a vast majority of the tropical Atlantic. There are tropical waves embedded in here, but nothing that seems to be lighting up the atmosphere with convective activity. The Gulf of Mexico generally clear. This is just parts of the moisture feed and energy associated with that upper level trough that has been kind of stuck here over the eastern U.S. that's now going to lift out. And eventually, as I'll show you at the end here today, Bermuda High is going to set up shop over the western Atlantic and change the pattern just a little bit. But overall, no issues seen in the Atlantic. And these systems here trying to develop in the Pacific Ocean, the eastern Pacific. There's the first one. Here's the second one. And I guess this is the third one. Really not much gusto, if you will, with these systems. Just not much coming from them. Maybe they'll develop. Maybe one or two of them will become a hurricane. We'll see. But overall, just something seems to still be missing from the ingredients list to get things going. Even out in the western Pacific, which I'll show you in a moment, with the developing typhoon out there. Luckily for Japan, as I'll show you, it too doesn't look to be a high impact wind event, but we'll get to that in a moment. So let me show you the sea surface temperature anomalies that updates today from this particular site, the NOAA NESDIS site. I understand from some talk on Twitter that the other methodology, the CDAS method, might be having some issues, and some of those anomalies that it was reporting in the Atlantic just seem unreasonably cold. Especially when you look at this one, and it updated today, this area in the Atlantic, these patches of orange in here inside of the yellow, that's not blue. I know my colors, and I've used this chart for years, many, many years, and I've seen Dr. Klotzbach reference this from Colorado State University from time to time, and so it seems to me that the main development region continues to warm ever so slightly. Anywhere like last year? No, of course not. It's a completely different look than what we had last year. But the tropical Atlantic, cooler than average, but not substantially cooler than average. Let's just put it that way. Looking in the Pacific, I find this interesting. These little small ribbons of cold anomalies showing up in the INSO regions here. Every time it doesn't stay warm is less time that it's going to be in El Nino territory for the upcoming peak of the hurricane season. And I noticed, too, that there was a little bit of a drop, a tenth of a degree or so, in the Nino 3.4 data out here on the daily update from Levi's site at Tropical Tidbits. Just, looking at things on a daily basis doesn't give you the whole picture, but it gives us something to do while we wait and see when and if there are hurricanes. So far, ever since Chris left the western Atlantic, it hasn't been too busy, so that's good. But let's zoom in, just kind of wanting to prove my point here about this area, the main development region. I'm not imagining things. These oranges here, that's positive anomalies, somewhere in here maybe, half a degree, maybe more, above the long-term average. And these blues are confined up here, which are negative anomalies below the long-term average, but they're not overwhelming, and they certainly don't look anything like what we saw at the beginning of the hurricane season, where a lot of this As you remember, I've shown that chart quite often. This was all dominated by very deep blue colors, indicating quite deep, steep, whatever negative anomalies. So we'll revisit this again on Monday. This updates every Monday and every Thursday. All right, so looking at the wide shot here of the whole globe and Mercator projection, if you know your geography, that's when you can take the map and just kind of stretch it out into a rectangle, as we see here, Mercator projection. And everything's nice and easy. It's north, south, east, and west. You know, no conical, curved lines, whatever. But that's just a geography thing. What I want to point out to you, a little bit busier in the tropics now, these two areas of invest, 92E, 91E, and I guess eventually a system will get an invest number for here. And remember, that's just the way that these are assigned, sort of a numbering system before they become named in a particular basin. And these little I's, as it says, invest area 91 and 92. Meanwhile, on the Westpac, this one will be interesting. I talked about this a couple of days ago. Tropical storm Jongdari. Maybe you don't roll the J, but Jongdari headed towards Japan. We'll look at a close-up track map of that in a moment. And then Tropical Storm Wukong moving out of the picture. But it is Jongdari that will pose problems for Japan. I thought about maybe flying over to Tokyo over here, but it's not going to be near enough to Tokyo. Considering that I've never been to Japan, this is not the one for me to break me in, so to speak, and intercept a typhoon. The Joint Typhoon Warning Service, or Warning Center, what are they, out of Honolulu, I believe, indicating a curve back towards the Japanese coast, which is unusual, and that is owed to the fact that there will be an upper level trough over here in the mid-levels, the steering levels, that's kind of retrograding, and that counterclockwise flow will slingshot this system, Jongdari, into Japan. So James Reynolds, he lives out that way, and let me just pull him up here on Twitter because I want you to see who he is. He'll be out there because he lives there. I think he lives in Tokyo. I should have had this ready ahead of time, but that's okay. We can take care of it now because I like to show you who I follow. I like his volcano pics. So James Reynolds, Earth Uncut TV, right there. That is his Twitter handle, and he's going to be on top of this, as you could imagine, because he lives out in Japan. I don't know if Morgerman, if Mr. iCyclone is heading out there, Josh Morgerman, but James Reynolds lives there, I think in the Tokyo area, so he'll be covering this. Follow that young lad on Twitter, and you'll get some cool updates from whatever effects that Jongdari brings to the area. So we can sort of chase the typhoon or whatever, follow it, track it vicariously, live it through Mr. Reynolds out there in the Westpac. All right, so in the Atlantic Basin, I like looking at this because it shows me the overall pattern, kind of gives me an analysis of the atmosphere, where we're starting and where we're going over the next 7 days is what we're going to take a look at. West coast of Africa right here, the outline of the fairly substantial large subtropical ridge over the Atlantic, the troughiness, lower heights in the atmosphere over the eastern parts of North America. But you notice that it doesn't dip as far south. I added that. It's not there. See, that's the lowest height line I could find. And the flow starting to change to more southwesterly here, which is good. We can finally start to dry things out along the east coast. So let's put this into motion, and I'll show you the next 7 days, and I'll draw on it and kind of point some things out. Notice the shape of the ridge and where it's located overall. And at the end of this trough will lift out completely. And watch what happens here along the east coast. This system, the Bermuda High, starts to expand and retrograde and move to the west a little bit through here. So you watch. I'll take my telestration away. You see that? A little bit more influence, more and more to the west there, a little bit more to the west. And then finally, it literally sets up shop at the end of the animation there, right off the Carolinas. That's why they call it the Bermuda High. So Bermuda is somewhere right in here. So the western extension of the Bermuda Azores High now the Bermuda High, because you see there's really nothing. There's the Azores. Not much in the way of ridging out that way. So the Bermuda High extending its influence fairly far to the west, and luckily for us, no hurricanes coming to the south of that, or they would be steered into the Gulf of Mexico, depending on where they were latitudinally, north or south. But no hurricanes, so we don't have to worry about that. Interesting, though, at the end of the week, this is a week out, a large area of energy trying to gather southwest of the Cape Verde Islands. So maybe something to watch for at the end of the coming week. We shall see. But overall, folks, things are good. They're nice and quiet. So, use this time to check the generator, make sure your car's in good shape, the tires are up to snuff, you're not going to have a breakdown if you have to evacuate. Just little things that could be done now, just kind of reminding you, putting on the preparedness hat again. We can hope for a quiet season all we want. Nobody is hoping to have their lives devastated from a hurricane. They are interesting to track. They are fascinating to watch. And they are exciting to be in just by default. And remember, that word exciting does not have to be positive. I'm not saying it's exciting like you're going to go to Disney World. Because, trust me, I've gone to Disney World with my kids, and sometimes that word exciting is not necessarily positive either. Story for another day. When I write my book, there'll be a chapter on, how I deal with the family. But anyway, we track these things, and they are truly fascinating. But, they can get you, and you know that. But I got to remind you, because we get swept up in all the other things going on in the world. And, oh, my goodness, the hurricane's coming. I forgot to get the oil changed or fix that, the brake pads that were about to go or whatever. I don't want you to have any problems. We're trying to minimize as many of these problems as we can. And so when things are quiet like this, take advantage of that and be ready. All right? I'm doing the same thing here with my family, just, in case, starting to stockpile water, things like that we may need. I'm not worried about anything, but, I'm trying to practice what I preach a little bit. Have a good rest of your Thursday. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Thank you so much for visiting me on the YouTube channel here, or wherever you're watching this, if it's in our app or on our website, on the Hurricane Track Insider site, or on our Patreon support page. Lots of ways to view it. The bottom line is you did, and I thank you for that. I'll have more for you tomorrow.